Hello everybody, welcome back to the 1.0 Exploration series. We're finally at Farum Azula, making our way towards the endgame of Elden Ring. There's a lot of very interesting facts about this particular area, so do stay tuned. The next video should be the actual finale of the entire series, and then after that we'll be doing a bigger video, compiling all the parts together and also correcting a lot of mistakes that have happened during the series or anything I missed. Alright, let's get started. The cutscene that plays to introduce Farum Azula does have the red lightning striking around the area in 1.0. In post-release, there is a ton of lightning shooting all over the place, even with sound effects and everything, but it doesn't have either of that in 1.0. As you may have gathered from the title of the video, Crumbling Farum Azula is called Doomed Farum Azula in 1.0, which maybe is just my inner edgelord, but I kinda like that more than Crumbling. It definitely speaks more to its fate, I think, than Crumbling. Just like at the Halleck tree, the beginning of the Limgrave theme starts playing whenever the music fires up for the area, before it plays the proper track for Crumbling Farum Azula. Where at the beginning of Farum Azula, the Smithing Stone 8 is Living Jar Shards in 1.0. Before the dragon swoops down, the Smithing Stone 8 is Lightning Grease. The dragon fights seem pretty much the same, but he didn't drop the Ancient Mithing Stone upon death. And then right behind there, the Smithing Stone 8 here is a Gravity Stone fan. In the ceiling of the Beast Grave Depths, there's no Gravastone in this little altar. The Great Grave Glovewort is replaced by Compound Stones here, which is the equivalent of Gravastone, so perhaps they just moved that from here to the other side in the current patch. While I was fighting the lightning casting beastmen, I noticed that the delay lightning attack that they do doesn't really have a sound effect whenever they're in the ground. And the sound effect they do when it fires off is fairly weak compared to how dangerous it really is. Here's how it sounds normally. It's a subtle effect, but it's just enough to let you know that you're in danger, I would say. While we're in this area, I did get the Lightning Incantation book, and I turned it in. Apparently, Ancient Dragon's Lightning Strikes is called Wrath of the Ancient Drakes, and Ancient Dragon's Lightning Spear is called Ancient Dragon Bolt. The style requirements seem the same, but the FP cost for the Lightning Spear seems almost double in 1.0. I did visit the Warmface area, but nothing seemed different at all. It seemed pretty much identical. Only want to comment on that the Glovewort Picker's Bell is named the same thing. So perhaps the ghost ones are just named the other different name. Going from the Tempest-Facing Balcony Grace, the dragon over the areas that you traverse through here is not only awake, but he shoots down fire at you from above. I have heard that he is supposed to fire lightning at you from up there. At least I heard that when I was playing my first playthrough, but I never actually had that happen myself, so this is definitely a surprise either way for me. This altar with the Great Grave Glovewort is a Smithing Stone 8 in 1.0. Going on to the Dragon Temple where the Godskin Duo are, there is no Dragon Wound Grease here in this ledge. There's also no Rune Arc here. There is no Azula Beastman Ashes, but we actually already have them. We found them in Caelid, if you missed that video. And this Somber 9 is an exclusive Stone Clumps, near the Azula Beastman Ashes. Now going on to the Godskin Duo themselves, but now Summon Sign wasn't there, even in my character which has him alive still, even after killing Rockard and everything. So he might not be 1.0 as a summon, let me know if that's inaccurate. For the boss fight itself, the only difference I've noticed is that they seem to have less HP individually, because the total health bar only went down to about 30% when both were killed instead of around half, like in current patch. I did some math. To kill the first apostle, it took 5,733 damage in 1.0, but the full HP bar was less depleted than normal. And to kill the same one, it took 6,863 in current patch, roughly 1,000 HP more, but of course the HP bar was more depleted. This means that you need to kill more duo spawns overall to defeat them 1.0, but they each have less HP individually. And at Borderline I feel like that's more balanced. You could be more strategic in your bursts of DPS in order to kill one, and then potentially take out the other one before the respawns as well. I also noticed that if I killed both too fast, they respawn the last one you just killed indefinitely. Meaning that if you killed a noble last, and the other one hadn't respawned yet, it would actually respawn the noble right away. And then the same thing but with the apostle. I had this situation happen for both of the different characters, instead of kind of alternating between the noble and apostle. Either that or it's completely random and I just got incredibly lucky both times. Mind you, you usually only kill 4 Godskins or so to beat the boss in post-release, so it may not be as clear if that's the case in there too. When killed, they still drop Black Flame Tornado and the bell, but Black Flame Tornado is called Flame Tornado only. Now going past the Dragon Temple altar, the weapons of the Beastmen have a yellow lightning effect on them instead of the red one. On the floating rock bridge where the shield talisman +2 is, you get shot at by lightning as you cross. Well, I've never had this happen in current patch, but eventually realized why. There's this Beastman enemy overlooking you at the opposite side of the bridge that is shooting at you. Of course, I investigated this in current patch and turns out that the enemy is in the same spot and is trying to shoot lightning at you, but it's just landing where he's standing instead. When I reached the end of the bridge in current patch, one of the lightning attacks did reach me finally. Perhaps you're ahead of me on this, but this is my working theory. FromSoft scripted this very specific ambush, but eventually realized that the range of these enemies is a bit ridiculous, especially in other areas. We'll have another encounter later in the video that'll prove this more directly. So they decided to nerf the enemy overall significantly, but didn't account for this ambush being changed, so they just kinda messed it up. Because even in 1.09 he still tries to shoot you, but it just lands where he is, which is what happens to you when you're locked onto an enemy and try to do something like Rain of Arrows, but you're too far from the effective range and you just shower yourself instead. This is only my theory, but I think it's a satisfactory explanation, even if it's not quite what happened. And as someone who would like to make games one day, to see a scripted ambush that seemingly got botched by accident, and they either haven't noticed or decided to ignore for now is interesting. But I was fascinated by this, so I figured it's something that you'll find interesting as well, especially if you're watching this series. Over in the Dragon Temple Lift side area, this Smithing Stone 8 is replaced by a Gravity Stone chunk. That's the second situation like this, replaced by a Gravity Stone specifically. Alexander still shows up for the end of his quest line, but he's surrounded in a gold summon queue for some reason. I did actually notice this as I was approaching the area because you can see it from far away. In 1.0 he actually finishes his entire dialogue before attacking you, instead of starting mid-dialogue. When locked on, he only has the name Furled Finger, like when we summoned Melina for Morgott. When you beat him, he doesn't shatter instantly, so you don't get jump scared as intensely in 1.0 apparently. When I saw his drops, at first I thought he gave both shards, but only the Alexander's remains is a talisman. The Shard of Alexander equivalent, presumably. The other one is the Innards equivalent, Alexander's Core, which from my understanding, Jar Baron's quest isn't even in the day 1 patch. I was added in a patch later on, so this is presumably useless for now. Going forward a little bit from where Alexander was, I couldn't pick up the Ancient Dragon cookbook because there seemed to be a dupe of this here, so I must have got it at some point prior already. And around from that area with the cookbook, there's a little drop where there's normally a Smithing Stone 8, but it's not there in 1.0. While we're in the side path, I want to quickly look at the imbued stone key warp from the Belfries to Farum Azula. Whenever you warp in, you don't actually get the area pop up, so it doesn't spoil you where you are, I suppose. Which I kind of like. It makes this a lot more mysterious, and you won't have the map if you come here really early, so. There's a different track playing here from the Crumbling Farum Azula one, which is what should be playing. But I actually couldn't pin down which one it was from going to the soundtrack, at least the area music segment of it. If you can figure it out, let me know. And the Peldrake's Talisman was still there, which we actually have all three, surprisingly. Over in the Dragon Temple rooftops, the Dragon Red Lightning Minefield is still the same. Killing the dragon does not drop the Ancient Smithing Stone, instead it is where the Somber Ancient Stone is, but that does mean that the Somber is now missing, as I couldn't find anywhere else. By the way, this is how many of all the max stones we got for each of them, after having explored everything in the game but this level and the Ashen Capital. And I've only used one of each so far, so it's safe to say that this game is a lot more stingy about max level upgrades before launch. And the little segment where there's the 2 banished knights after a ladder, there's no dragon tower shield in this chest. First time in a while where we have an empty chest actually. Going over to the Great Bridge, Bernal still invades before the Lord Talisman. He seems to cast Protection of the Urchin instead of Golden Vow 1.0, but everything else seemed the same actually. When using the Blasphemous Claw, the effect surrounding it is different, and the Lord's Talisman is still there and it seems to have the same effect. The Drake armor is still here and seems the same, but the set actually mentions an NPC that is never mentioned in post-release, I believe. It's called Ondrej, the Dragon Tracker. Pronunciation may vary. That's it for just the general Farum Azula area, so let's just go discuss the bosses now. If you run to the Placidusax area without killing enemies, you can actually get a good preview of how far the range of the lightning casting beastman is. It'll keep following me till I'm almost near at the platform where you have to go to a Placidusax itself. Which is a point for what I was talking about earlier. If they can really shoot you from all the way up there, and possibly without having you in view, their range is pretty ridiculous. Not that it's much of an issue, but it is pretty ridiculous. When laying down to get transported to Placidusax, it does take slightly longer for the cutscene to go through for 1.0. But now to the fight itself. The fire that Placidusax shoots is normally a pure goldish tint, but it has like a greenish hue at times in 1.0, I've noticed. The music doesn't pause whenever he's doing the super nuke attack. I feel like I might have noticed that it actually does maybe change the volume of it slightly, but it's definitely not nearly as powerful as it is in post-release. Here's how it sounds normally. And the riposte indicator when you stance break it is red instead of yellow, which I don't think I've seen that in the series, so that's definitely interesting. Besides that, that's pretty much it. There's actually no other difference that I noticed, personally. Checking his remembrance rewards. The Dragon King's Cragblade has lower dex requirement, but it has a faith requirement in this one. And Placidusax Ruins is called Placidusax Judgment, and it requires 2 memory slots instead of 3. Now going on to Maliketh. First thing you'll notice that the alternate dialogue that you get if you do Grong's quest is still there, but I did double check both sets of dialogue, whether you've done it or not. For 1.0, they all seem exactly the same, so nothing to comment on there. As you may have noticed already, the Beast Clergyman is called Beast Pastor instead. One thing that stood out to me right away is that some of the attacks are animated differently, especially these little sweep attacks. And I'm a bit conflicted on this. I like how they look a little more smoother. I don't tend to like really snappy attack animations like that. It makes it a little hard to telegraph what's going on. And I don't know, it just feels a little try-hard from the boss, if that makes any sense. But you can tell it's definitely a little bit unpolished too, so I'm not sure if I prefer it or not. The Beast Claw attacks were earthquakes instead, both of them. Now going on to phase 2. The music then transitioned to the second part of the soundtrack, neither during the cutscene or the actual start of phase 2. The track just stayed in the phase 1 part. The slamdown attack is animated differently as well in here. This one I don't have a preference for one or the other, I kind of like both of them for its own reasons. I believe this is a famous change, but there's some purple particle effect showing at the very end of some of his super attacks, like the wind slashes, the spin attack at the end of the 4 projectile combo, and the earthquake. Although in this one, it doesn't actually have the earthquake, it's just the explosion when he lands. There's no second delayed attack. At one point, he staggered himself with the boulders from phase 1. That was quite funny. I don't know if that can happen in current patch, but something happened. And he also got stuck in a pillar at one point too, which I've never seen in post-release either. He actually works fairly well while platforming in the environment and stuff. I still died to him when he did that because I'm terrible. And then he did it immediately in the next attempt. And I did kill him that time. After killing him, in 1.0 it actually took a little longer for the screen to fade to black than in current patch. So kind of like the Placidusax cutscene earlier. But then the cutscene after was exactly the same. Maliketh's Black Blade, the Greatsword, has different stats and scaling. That seems to be a trend now. And the Ashen War is called Destined Death Unbound instead of just Destined Death in 1.0. Before ending, I want to quickly correct some things from the last video. It turns out that the Meteor Staff does give you a boost for gravity spells. It just doesn't state in the description. I tested this with 2 staffs that had the same sorcery scaling, and it does seem to give an additional boost. And you can also do the holding in different hands thing. I don't know the 2-hand thing when you have 2 of the same staff, but I assume it's theoretically possible to do that. And also quickly wanted to check if the gravel seal may be dropped from the lightning casting beastman, but I didn't get any drops. I did try to max out my luck and discovery drop and farm for around 15-20 minutes and no results. So it's possible it may just not be in the game. I certainly haven't heard anyone tell me it is, but perhaps it could be on a different enemy. Time will tell. And yeah, that is all for the video. It was certainly very interesting. The whole scripted ambush thing was something that I found very fascinating, as I said. And I wish I could kind of reverse engineer why some things like that happen in the game from 1.0 to current patch. But it's definitely a little hard to tell sometimes with the changes. It's hard to see any obvious reason why something will be changed. We can certainly speculate, but there's not a lot of evidence for that. But that's a situation where there might be. It actually makes me a little sad that that's not what current patch is. I do feel like that could be an interesting encounter that, would be nice to experience. It's not much of a threat or anything, but it does add some tension to that little bridge. It's also a very small thing that they haven't noticed or they just haven't got to it because they have other priorities. And then the purple particle effect thing, that's one of the only things I would know about 1.0 just from osmosis and people talking about it. Or maybe it was in a trailer or something. Not that I watched it, but I think I've seen it after the fact or something. But either way, it was less than I thought. I thought it was going to be all his particle effects going to be purple, but no, it still has a lot of the red and black hue. Anyway, as mentioned earlier, this is the penultimate part, so next part is going to be Ashen Capital and talking about just a lot of things to conclude the series. So for example, I'll touch up on all the name of the runes that we collected, and I should have pretty much all of them by now. And I'll probably respec my character in order to try out most weapons and spells to see if I catch anything really significant. May not talk about every single one depending, but we shall see. I also may make that a premiere just to, build up for the very last video. I may have to think about that one just in case it's not as eventful as I think it could be. Because obviously, there's not a whole lot to the Ashen Capital. There's 3 bosses, a couple of major item pickups, the end of 1 quest line I believe, and a couple mini bosses. But it's not a whole lot of different things to discuss. There's just a few major things, but maybe not major if there's no big differences. And then the ending talk, which I'll try my best to get all the endings to show if I don't mess up. I think usually if you close the game from the PlayStation menu before the whole cutscene goes through, you can reset it. I have done that before, funnily enough. And hopefully that happens. If I mess it up, that's gonna suck. But I don't know, maybe I'll just work a little bit extra for that case. But yeah, if you are new to the series and want to catch the rest before we conclude in a week or 2, depending on how much time I need, there's a playlist with all the parts in them, and it'll be a good time to catch up so you can be caught up on what is different so far. But besides that, if you watched this video, I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you consider subscribing, and it'll be nice to see you again. Yeah, until the last video, everyone. Bye bye.